We got a good turnaround. Let's get us started. So again, welcome everyone. Welcome to Intro to Data Analytics by General Assembly for the 2024 Google Summer Academy. We're your hosts today. I'm Eli. I work at General Assembly. Shaheed does too. Want to share with you all why is General Assembly here, why we partner with Google, why Google trusts us in delivering this workshop. We've been around for some time now, since 2011, and our focus is to train anyone on the most in-demand tech skills of nowadays, which are data, coding, UX design, and then anyone can go ahead and build a career in any of the variations those three skills can produce: data scientist, data analyst, data engineer. There's a bunch of different variations, but we specialize in that in-demand, hands-on, live training for anyone, and really anyone from any background to get those skills. Today, you're gonna get a feel of what data looks like and the day-to-day of a data analyst. And we might even do an exercise today for you guys to test drive yourselves into a data skills career, what that looks like. We've graduated about 100,000 alumni worldwide. You can always go to our LinkedIn page and check us out. I'm going to put the link there and look at where our alumni are working. And with this, what I want to tell you all is, I think we know what we're doing. You're in good hands today. We've done this for a long time, even for companies, training their employees, but 100,000 alumni says that. Can we move to the next slide?
Sure.
All right, and Shaheed is your instructor today. He's been with GA since 2019, training different cohorts from different backgrounds in data analytics. And he has trained himself in data science, data analytics. He works in this, breathes and works data day and day. So he knows what he's doing. And I encourage you all to ask him your most interesting, pressing questions about data analytics. But let's do an agreement. For the questions, write them on the chat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be compiling all of the questions. So at the end, we make space to go through all of them. And that way, we don't derail Shaheed from his plan today. Unless, Shaheed, if you see a question that is on topic, relevant, let's answer in the moment, go for it. And I'll just cross it off the list.
Brilliant.
With that, I'll pass it over to you, Shaheed. Take it over, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Elias. Hi, everybody. I'm Shaheed. I'll be your instructor today. Hopefully, my sound is okay. I know some of you have said in the chat that the sound's not too good, but hopefully mine is good. Okay, brilliant. See lots of thumbs up. So brilliant. So I'm your instructor. A bit about me. I'm experienced in the financial services industry in London, worked in lots of analytical roles, also delivering data at scale in these big organizations. I completed my master's in data science during the pandemic. I love learning and I wanted to augment my analytic skills. And so I spent my evenings doing data science, which was brilliant. As Elias said, I've been working at GA since 2019. I've delivered, I don't know how many now, but many data analytics courses, the part-time version, as well as the bootcamp versions. And so I can definitely answer any questions you might have about that. And also, I guess a bit about me. I spend my free time in London doing improvised comedy. Although we have a 1-year-old baby at the moment at home, so we don't have much free time, but I still love it. So I'm really looking forward to this intro. So just before we get started, tell us a joke. That's not how improv works, but I will be funny, I promise. Before we get started, yeah, just a quick note on Google Meet. You guys are great already, giving me so many compliments. Quickly on Google Meet, please use the chat to share your thoughts and ask any questions. Elias said he will try to pull the questions all together, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. We don't have a lot of time, so we might not get to every one, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. There's also a Q&A at the end, which you might need for more general types of inquiries. And also, if you have like a burning question that you think everybody should know about, it's fine to raise your hand and we can do that in the moment. I'm happy to use my improv skills to do that. um, the other thing I wanted to say is use the reactions. I've seen you do that already. And I'm working with two screens, so sometimes I won't be looking directly at you. Sometimes I'll look to the side like that. So just so you know, I am concentrating. I'm just looking at my other screen. All good? Thanks, Miko. Okay, so on the agenda today is we're going to define what data is, start at the basic level to understand what we are talking about. We are then going to talk about the term data analyst and what data analysts do. And then we're going to do a small exercise, which involves the steps: framing, preparing, analyzing, interpreting, and communicating. There'll be a short 5-minute break in the middle, and we end with a quick survey and Q&A. Do keep in mind that this is a beginner level overview of data analytics. We are recording this, and you will receive the recording after you fill in the survey. So we want you to fill in the survey after the class so that we get we hear your thoughts on the session. Okay. So let's dive in. So I'm going to ask you to help me. Let's try to define what data is. Can some of you give me your thoughts in the chat, what you think data is? What's a good definition for you? I'll give you like 30 seconds. Okay, I'll read out a few. Did somebody raise their hand? You can speak if you want to. Okay, no worries.
It's information in different formats,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
structured or unstructured, and different. It may be an image or text.
yeah, very good. That's a really good start as a definition. I'll just read out a few others. So Ramya says information in different formats, 100%. You can look at video, text, numbers, all kinds of things. Alphanumeric information, exactly, it can be that. So the common theme here is that it's about information. Structured record of information. Other ones are any information that can be collected, a combination of different types of information. So lots of similar kinds of things. Hannah says a combination of symbols. We'll define it now. I think you're all on the right path. So let's just look at a few examples quickly. Data can look like this. So I'll give you a moment to sort of absorb that a little, and then I'll talk through it. So what this is a company in New York put these billboards up on the subway, as they call it there, and they're called Seamless. And what they did is they used the data that they have to create these charts, which essentially call out certain neighborhoods for their most particular attribute. So Gramercy Park is the most potassium-rich neighborhood. That's based on the number of bananas ordered. And Upper West Side ordered a lot of Chicago-style pizzas, and that means they have an identity crisis. It's a bit of fun, but it's definitely using data that they have about their customers to present a fun advertisement. Let's look at another one. This is an ad from a Spotify campaign that also leveraged user data to call out funny listener trends. I don't know if anybody's listened to the Boozy Brunch playlist. Maybe you have. I haven't, I have to admit. Do you have any examples of data that you see in your everyday life that make you smile or even make you frown? Did you take publishers' user reviews? Yeah, I spend a lot of time reading Amazon reviews. I think it makes me more indecisive, actually. Okay, cool. So let us define data formally. So like all of you said, data is information that exists in a variety of formats and sizes. It consists of facts, figures, or observations collected from various sources. And it can be used to gain insights and make better decisions. So data comprises pieces of information. So for example, about me, my name, age, job, that is data about me. That tells me my attributes or who I am in the form of data. And so I think you've all been exposed to data, but it's good to formalize it in that way. So you can think about anything and say, that's data, that's data. Right, so let's look at an example of some data. So this is bio information stored about two people, Jeremy Woodson and Sarah St. Laurent. We can see the same data in two formats. At the bottom, you can see that the labels on the top in bold make up the column headers in the table. And that bold labels, name, age, city, is what we would call a variable. So in other words, a variable is a very common term. We will use it today and also in any data analysis you do. Probably some of you've done like courses at university or some other places and heard the term variable, maybe in statistics. So we use that to describe a piece of information that is similar for all of the different rows, and rows in our case is what we call an observation. So we have two observations, one for Sarah St. Laurent and one for Jeremy Woodson, and each of the attributes that we have about them can be stored in a variable, and what we store in the variable is the value of that attribute. I just pause there to give you a moment to digest that. So there are other ways to organize data. Romeo was saying that you can have video or like text data, but it's also very common to, especially in lots of companies you might work, that the data will be stored in a database like this, in a table, and that's called tabular data, and it's a lot of where the data is stored also. So it's good to know how that works. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a definition of data that makes sense. I think you're all seeing data in your day-to-day all the time. You read the newspaper. Now you wouldn't come to this class without wanting to know what is data analysis. Any ideas? Would love to hear your definition before we formalize it. Please write it in the chat. Cecilia says, trying to draw insights from data. Yeah, I think that's a really good start. Using data for strategies. So to define your strategy, for example, in business, drawing out the main information, new insights, correct? Searching for meaning. I think I like the existential feeling about that. I like searching for meaning. But data can find meaning, hopefully. Finding trends and generating insights from them, categorizing, recognizing patterns, and using insights to solve problems. I think you're all on the exact right track with this. That is almost exactly what data analysis is for. Let's just give you our definition. So data analysis is the process of examining data to draw conclusions about that information. It should inform your decision making. And therefore you should make better decisions. That is essentially what data analysis is for. So in this class, we'll learn how to examine a simple data set, which we use to derive some basic insights, and such as predicting what Netflix content someone like Sarah might like to watch. If she likes heartwarming shows about dogs, these ones, Dogs, Benji, Dog Gone, I've not watched any, I'll be honest. She might also like a reality show about dogs, for example. I'm sure most people have watched Netflix, and so even if you watch one of the other streaming sites, they always try to recommend you something else, and that's based on your user data. Oh, Benji's heartbreaking. I'm sorry to hear that. um, so they're going to use your user data to recommend you new shows to watch, which are supposedly similar. So today you're gonna act as a data analyst. But before we get started, let's make another definition. Let's do one more definition. What does a data analyst do? Again, would love to hear your definitions. Cornelia says working with data. Yeah, I guess that's the start. Yeah, I agree. Aggregating data, finding patterns, telling a story, comparing data, gather data and visualize data. I think this is collect, prepare, and analyze data for a specific epistemic purpose. That is quite a good definition, I would say. Let's show you our definition. A data analyst works to interpret data, so works with the data, trying to interpret it to bring meaningful and actionable insights. They are going to be sitting there crunching the numbers, but they also need to be able to interpret the numbers as well as communicate this to business stakeholders and therefore people who might want to make decisions based on your analysis. Thanks for all your contribution. I think you're doing very good at them. And so all I'm doing is just formalizing the definition. Who else analyzes data in their daily work? What you'll find is that all types of jobs in corporations have a portion which is doing data analysis. Product managers, they want to understand if their product fits in a market, so they would analyze the data. In human resources, they would look at what type of hire would be the most successful. So they would maybe use data-driven metrics to understand what type of person to hire. Marketing has become a very data-driven industry. There's a whole industry of digital marketing, which essentially is looking at data to understand how you should be spending your budget. So you might not be called a data analyst, but a lot of roles in companies are doing data analysts. So that's just to name a few of them. So there are many more fields where your title may not be data analyst. Maybe you'll be insight analyst. Maybe you'll be marketing analyst. You could be all kinds of things, but essentially the work of data analysis is still being performed. If you think about your current situations, how do you use data analysis? It would be good to share that with each other to see that perspective. If you have a short line in the chat, it would be good. Maybe in your job or in your day-to-day. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. So people performing data analysis will use both more basic tools. I'm not 100% on board with the word basic, because Google Sheets and Excel, you can accomplish a lot, but they are more maybe not formalized tools, let's say, and more sophisticated tools like Tableau and SQL. These tools allow you to gather and organize your data, analyze it, and also make visualizations. Some require some skill and training, Tableau and SQL, to use, and obviously we offer that in our courses. We learn Excel, we learn Tableau, we learn SQL, we do Python as well, and Power BI, which is very similar to Tableau. Has anybody used Tableau or SQL in there before? My journey, let's say, I started using Excel at university a number of years ago now. Somebody uses R. I've then learned some programming in VBA, which is based in Excel. I then learned Access databases before learning SQL. And now I've learned Tableau, Power BI, as well as Python. So that's kind of my journey. Nicholas uses R. I've not used R much, but you can accomplish a lot with R as much as you can with Python. Cool, Miguel. You've done a lot. Hanif too. Yeah, SQL is good. However, you can't visualize in SQL, so you have to take that data out of SQL and put it in a tool like Tableau or Excel. So that's why it's worth learning something above SQL. There are other tools which I haven't mentioned, like Looker or ClickView. There's loads of different tools which are considered like data visualization tools or data analysis tools. But I would say generally Excel, SQL, Tableau, Power BI, Python. Those are like the main ones being used at the moment. So for today, we're going to use Google Sheets. So what you'll need to participate is a Google account, which hopefully you all already have one. We're using Google Sheets because it's cross-platform, as in you can open Excel and requires no setup. You can just run it in your browser which makes it super easy to use. You can run it on a really basic computer. Sheets will let us perform some tasks that allow us to do some analysis. I think it's quite a powerful tool, actually. I know on the previous slide it says it's basic, but I would say it's, with Sheets you can do a lot. And there's also like fun functionality in Google Sheets, which you wouldn't get in most other software, like using Google Translate directly in Google Sheets. I'm not sure you can use Gemini, but possibly. But definitely Google Translate you can use in Google Sheets. So, don't knock it. It's a very useful tool, and it's free. Well, free as in you give Google your your name. Okay, so let us start by introducing the data analysis workflow. Now, I mentioned the steps a little earlier, but let's first give you some good news. Congratulations, you work at Netflix. Surprise. Your challenge is to provide users with recommendations for what they should watch after finishing a show. So we'll give you a glad Miko is enjoying that. I will share some data with you later, and so we're going to look at some data that we have and try to recommend some shows based on that data. But first, let us talk about the data analysis workflow. So what it is, so this is General Assembly's data analysis workflow. It is a problem-solving framework that we'll use throughout the class to break down issues and structure our solutions. It gives you a way of making sure that when you're doing an analysis, it has some structure and you always end up with a good outcome. So what that consists of is typically we will frame questions that we want to answer in our analysis. So in a business, this would most likely be in conjunction with your business stakeholder who wants to make some business decisions. So we would go to them and try to understand the problem and frame questions that we need to answer with data. We then will need to prepare the data. So we first need to obtain data, clean and prepare the data. So data is often messy. We're going to give you a really sort of clean data set, but in the real world, let's say, data is messy and will always need some form of cleaning, formatting to be able to answer the questions that we framed for our analysis. After you have your data and you've done cleaning, what we call the prepare phase, we will look at the analysis phase. So we're going to now analyze this clean data that we've prepared. So this really is where we answer the questions that we had framed using any of the tools that we have at our disposal. So we could answer the questions in SQL, or we need to answer it with a chart. So we do it in Tableau, or if we don't have Tableau, we can do it in Excel or Google Sheets. So what we'd use is summary statistics. So for example, we'll look at it a little later, but like an average of a number would be a way of analyzing something and therefore understanding an answer to a question. And we could also look at some charts that we will plot. So this is quite high level. We'll go into more detail over the next slides when we look at the data. So if you're finding it a bit abstract for the moment. So after we do the analysis step, we need to interpret our results, which means understanding what the data is telling us, understanding the answer that we're getting from the data. And it's quite important not to like ascribe something that isn't in the data. So we'll talk about that also later. But what you need to try and do is actually look at the results and have no bias, which is impossible. But try to have no bias and actually say what the data is saying. Once you have that sort of result of the analysis and you've interpreted it, you can now try and communicate your results. So this would be a report in charts, for example, or a lot of companies would have dashboards which you will deliver to your stakeholders. It just depends what is the best. You could just, verbally deliver your results with a chart, or you can whatever makes sense in the situation. So for this class, we are going to follow this workflow so that you get a sense of the process data analysts use. Obviously, we only have a short time, so we will accelerate certain steps, but it should provide you a good introduction to the framework and the skills you'll need to analyze data. Okay. Okay. So right now we're at the frame stage during which we need to clarify our question. So we should start with an identifiable problem. We need to know what we're trying to solve and be able to articulate the problem. So it helps to frame the problem in the form of a question, which you can then answer. So often you wouldn't have one question. You would have multiple questions, and therefore you would need to frame multiple questions. However, obviously for our short example, we will only be doing one question. Blue says, I would assume it is an iterative process in case previous sets need to be adjusted. 100%, I definitely use it as an iterative process. You might end up with an analysis answer that doesn't 100% make satisfy your question, and you might need to go collect more data, for example. And so you would go back, collect more data, prepare it again, go back to analysis. So 100% is definitely an iterative process. Real life, exactly. Everything's an iterative process. An example from one of my previous roles, I'm happy to share. We tried to answer was whether we were able to predict when a patient would not attend their appointment for antiretrovirals it was in rural South Africa. So I was working with a data startup in South Africa, where I'm actually originally from, by the way. So now you know. And we were trying to answer that question. I'll tell you a bit more as we go along through the framework. So remember, our challenge is to provide users with recommendations for what they should watch after finishing a show. So can you write that as a question that we can then answer with data in the chat, please? I give you 20 more seconds. Okay, so Agnes says, what would you enjoy to watch after finishing the show you chose? That is almost there, I would say. What do people that like what I guess you like also watch? So based on other customers' viewing habits, what should a customer watch based on his interests? what shows are similar to the show that user watched and enjoys. Yeah, I think you're all on the right track there. So let me say my question. I might paste it for you. Just give me a sec. So can we take what we know about viewer behavior to predict what people will like? I'm gonna write this question. It's a bit longer. Yeah. Can we take what we know about viewer behavior, specifically trends among shows, movies, viewers tend to watch together to predict what people like? So I think you're all on the right track with your questions. But as you can see, we can use the data we have from our current user versus data we have on all our other users to understand what they might like and therefore recommend it to them. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So we're almost getting to the point where we're going to look at data, which is very exciting. So we've framed a question. Now what we want to do is we're in the prepare stage of our workflow. So getting the data you need can be tough sometimes. Look, if you work in a big company, possibly it's not as bad, but it can be difficult to get data, even if you work in a big company where you have to ask for the data. If you're fortunate, it'll be in a single location or file and will be organized, cleaned, and well documented. But that's unlikely. Who said Blue said real life? I think real life is messy data. So more often than not, you might need to piece data together from multiple sources. Already we see how understanding the problem becomes like an important part of the analytical process, because you need to know what data would be able to be used to answer your question. So you can collect data in many ways. There are traditional methods like interviews, surveys, experiments, and newer methods, which I'm sure you people have heard about, like web scraping and API connections. Let me just go to the next slide. So following on from my example from earlier, we had when I worked for the startup in South Africa, we had data which was provided by an NGO, and the NGO was distributing these antiretrovirals. So they had the data. However, this was recorded at very rural, informal medical establishments. So the data wasn't updated very often, and there was a lot of missing data. So that's the kind of data we were working with. And so it wasn't easy. And we kind of worked with the NGO to try and get more reliable data, but that sort of proved the stumbling block in the end, as in the data wasn't actually good enough, and they would need to have improved their systems of collection to actually be able to deliver on the problem. So, real life again. So quickly, just a few notes on how we get data, particularly from within companies. So my example is a bit unusual, working with an NGO in a rural part of town. But say I'm in London, you work for a company in London. If it's a reasonably sized company, there will be a team of data engineers, perhaps, whose job is really to deliver data to you as analysts as well as the business. And if they're good, they can get you the data. However, probably you have to wait in line and make requests. Also, data is also managed a lot by IT departments, because they generally build the systems which create the data. So if you imagine you work in a retailer and you are doing a point of sale system as the IT team, that point of sale system is not built to create data, but it creates data by default by the fact that people use it to enter sales, and therefore it creates data. So a lot of the time, IT departments are in charge of data in a lot of companies. And sometimes it can be quite frustrating. Now I've worked on the IT side, so and I've worked on the business side, and there is quite like uh, uh, a line in the middle where the business doesn't always get what it wants, and so there's a balance to be struck there. If you maybe work at smaller organizations and you don't have a data engineering team or an IT team, you can pull data directly from source. So maybe some of you have worked at a company that has like Salesforce, for example, and Salesforce is like software that's like almost everywhere, and it creates a lot of data. So sometimes there's like a report and you can just pull the data yourself and then do some analysis. That's just one example, but obviously lots of different software will have reports that allow you to pull data. Other places you can access data is databases. So use SQL to pull data out. And also something which is more sort of modern and ubiquitous, as in it's everywhere, is APIs. And APIs, let's just define that quickly. It stands for Application Programming Interface, which essentially means an intermediary between two applications. So I have a point of sale system that I want to have talk to my data analyst system. Let's call it Tableau. And therefore, I need to have an API between them, which allows me to automatically pull data from my point of sale system into Tableau. I didn't write the slides, but the person who did obviously likes an IPA. So don't confuse APIs with IPAs. Although maybe if it's late on a Friday, it's okay. Okay, so it would be complicated to go out and find data for our Netflix problem. However, if you did want to find Netflix data, there is data on like publicly available. In a good website is Kaggle. If you kaggle.com. If you go on Kaggle, you can find all types of data sets that are publicly available. And if you wanted to, you could probably find a Netflix data. We wanted to keep it simple. So we simulated a data set, which is very simple. And it is viewing figures for some users in Netflix for a few shows. It'll serve to illustrate how we can use data to solve problems. Any ideas how Netflix gets viewer data, like the process of doing that? Yeah. Yeah. So Anya says from the accounts. Yeah. Cecilia talks about logs, view history. Yeah. All of these things get recorded every time you interact with Netflix, the application on your TV or your laptop or your phone. It logs the action. So logs are what they are using to understand your data. So that's how it knows how you where it can ask you to resume watching because it knows where you stopped. Likewise, if you've been binge watching a show, you've seen the pop-up on the right. Are you still watching? Maybe you haven't been watching, but some people have. And so it just wants to confirm that you are actively watching and trying to save some bandwidth. Yeah, so I think you all got to that point. What would you do if the data you're looking for does not exist? So that's a good question. What would you do? So if you're in so say you're at Netflix and you can't find this data, you don't have it. Now, if you're an analyst, you need to almost do an investigation to understand if the data exists. So you would have to, so you know what you're looking for because you've framed your question, you know what kind of data you need to answer that question. And if you're in a company and you would need to go talk to the IT team who support the systems that create the data, or you'd need to go talk to the data engineering team to understand. So a lot of the job of an analyst is also, relationships with your team. Also, if you're not in a company and you can't talk to anybody, or you're in a small company, you have to use your wits. Come up with a way of finding the data. Can you do some web scraping? Um, can you do like an API, free API? So we use this police data API in the UK as a good way of accessing data, just to show you how to use an API for free. So it really depends. So I think Elias is collecting some questions, so we'll pick those ones up at the end. I don't know a good free guide, if I'm honest, but I'll try and think of one. Um, I understand, Cecilia. It feels overwhelming right now, but I think in terms of once you learn the technique, it can be done. I don't know a free guide that's good. However, YouTube is full of lots of useful videos. I'll try and think of one if I can. Thanks, Elias. You are taking note. YouTube School, exactly. YouTube School is amazing. I highly recommend it, but you have to find the right ones. Okay, so let's get some data now. So Ilias is going to paste this link for you, which is a Google Sheet. So the link will open in Google Sheets. Yeah, so don't worry about the different letters. They're all actually the same data set. So you can just use the one data set that Elias has provided. I'm going to come off that share and share my other screen because it has. So what you should have is something that looks like this on your screen. Hang on, let me share my. I need to share a different screen. Give me a second. My apologies. I don't use Google Meet all the time. Present something else. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to change my screen share. Okay, so you should see something that looks like this. Is that big enough? Yep. Now, what I want you to do is go to File and make a copy. So we don't want you to use the original file. We want you to use a copy of the original file. So you go, once you have it open, you go File and you say Make a copy. And then it'll ask you to share, to save a copy of that. I'm just saving it in my Google Drive. So make a copy and should open a new tab with the same data, which is just called copy. So it's just a slightly different name, but it's the same file. Let's make that bigger. I'll give you a moment to do that. So I'll just repeat what we said. Open the link in the chat. It should look like this. You say File and make a copy. I'll give you a minute to do that. Give me a thumbs up if you're on the right track. It's very validating seeing all that float. Okay, brilliant. Looks like most people have done it. It's quite good. So what is this data? So let's just talk about it a little bit. So Netflix IT department have sent us this data. Each row contains the viewing information for one show for one user. So for example, this subscriber has an ID of 2000. So that's a person, subscriber ID 2000. They watch Squid Game in one sitting. They actually watch 2.63 episodes of length 40. So that's in one sitting. That same person also watched Peaky Blinders. They watched 0.6 episodes of 45 minutes long, and so on and so on. So if you scroll down, you can see we have lots of different users, and you can see we repeat the user ID because we have different records for that person. They've watched lots of different shows. Okay. I'm going to give you a minute to just have a look at the data. Not a lot. And then we're going to do a small piece of analysis before we stop. We move on. Okay, Agnes, hopefully you're able to open it once you've downloaded it. Cecilia, so when you say you don't see the same data as I do, so you see subscriber ID is being repeated here in the column A, and this is subscriber 2000, and those are all the shows they watched, and that's the data. Did that make sense? Okay, so let us add some data to this. So what I want to do is, so what this is saying is that this person, subscriber 2000, watched 2.63 episodes of 40 minutes long. So what I would like to do, and what I want you to do, is type this. What's it called? Just give me a sec. Yeah, total minutes watched. I want you to type that. So we are going to create a new column. And the new column is going to be the total minutes watched in that sitting. So if you say equal to in the second row and select, so Google is trying to tell me to do certain things, which is fine, but we're going to do it manually. So cell C2 times D2. So in other words, what I'm calculating is for that user, how long did they spend watching Squid Game in that one sitting? 105 minutes. And then, okay, so Google Sheets wants to autofill. So autofill is use that same, what we call a formula, in every cell below. And I would say do that, yes. And what that's going to do is it's going to calculate for each row of data. So remember, this is a row of data. So for each row of data, it's going to calculate the total minutes watched for that show. Yeah, Cecilia, that's fine. Okay, so hopefully you're all there. Now, just before we take a break, we are going to create what's called a pivot table. So what is a pivot table? So let's do it, and then I think it will make sense when we do it, and then I'll define it also. So what this is showing us is users individual sort of watching, but actually what would be nice to see is actually a table which shows for each user all the shows and the times that they spend. So let's do it, and then I think it'll make more sense. So I just want to show you how to do this select. Now this is a little tricky. So if you hold down Shift and Control, or Command if you're on a Mac, if you hold down Shift and you press right, it then selects. You can see that on the screen, it's selecting the whole top row. And then remain holding Shift and Control or Command on a Mac, and you press down, and you'll see what it's done is it's selected all the data. Hopefully that worked. Otherwise, you'd have to do it like with your mouse, which is a bit slow, but that's a quick way of selecting data. So I'll do it one more time just to show you. Hold down Shift, Control, or Command if you're on a Mac. Press right. It then selects the top row. Keep holding down Shift and Control, or Command if you're on a Mac, and press down, and then it selects all the data. Okay. Then we say insert, and we're going to insert a pivot table. And I will explain to you how to create it and then what it is. And then hopefully it'll make sense. You want to create a new sheet. So you'll see it creates a table, which we're now going to fill in with some data. And what we want to fill in is in the rows. So on the right here, you'll see like you'll see certain things that you can do to that table. Now, pivot tables consist of rows, columns, values, and filters. So let's just concentrate on the first three: rows, columns, and values. So let us, in the rows, add subscriber ID. Whoops, that didn't work. Oh, no, it did work. So what that's done is it's put each of the subscriber IDs in that column. Yeah, I'll show you again, Cecilia. So if you remember, you select the data by using Shift and Control or Command and right and down, and you say Insert Pivot Table. I'll do it again. Insert Pivot Table. And you say New Sheet. Insert to New Sheet. And then it creates a sheet. All good? Yeah, makes sense. So in the rows, we want to add subscriber ID, which is what that does. In the columns, we want to put show. So what you can see, it's created a table which it's now going to ask us to fill values in. So what I want to fill values there is total minutes watched. And it asks you, okay, we'll look at that later, but essentially what it has filled the values in is for each of the users, it's showing me the total minutes watched for that show, which is a nicer way of looking at it. I think you'd agree. Because when you're looking at it like this, it's quite difficult to, it is possible, but it's quite difficult to compare users and shows. Whereas when you look at it like this, you can compare, okay, this user is definitely into Squid Game. We'll find that most users are into Squid Game, but they definitely like Squid Game and Peaky Blinders. They watch it quite a lot. Let us do one more thing and then we'll take a break. So you see this tick mark here. Let's put that off, and that just takes those total values away, and that's it. That's all. How did I get? Okay, so Cecilia, what I did is in the values here, you see values. You say add, and you say total minutes watched. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm gonna, let's see, 4 minutes past. Let's start on the dot 10 past. That's okay. Cool. See you in 10 past. Okay. Well, hopefully you're all back at 10 past. Give me a quick thumbs up. Show you're in the room. Amazing. I'm going to ask to do that all the time. It really feels quite good. So what I have on screen is an example, and I've thanks everybody. What I have on screen is an example project of one of my students who completed the data analysis bootcamp. I've also shared a link in the chat to her public Tableau Public profile, or the report on the Tableau Public. So Tableau Public is a way of sharing your work when you've created something. And so what we did at the end of every bootcamp, we have a big capstone project, and this is just an example I wanted to show you. So this is a good example of the skills that you might learn and how to present data. So this is done in like a report style. So Eva, she hadn't really done any data analysis before, and after 3 months, this is what she produced. So the World Happiness Report gets published every year. So I'll just go through it quickly. So it's kind of like setting the scene. What is the happiness report? And then it goes through what are the happiest countries? Anybody in Norway? And it does quite fun things. If you hover, it kind of shows you. So Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland. Some of you in Switzerland for sure. It's the 4th happiest country. There's a couple of others, and these are considered the least happiest. What you'll see is it's very much like driven by also economic factors. So you'll find poorer African countries feature in the least happiest, although it's not the only thing that features, because there is like these are the things that get input into the happiness score. Cool. So then Eva kind of divided by continent, and I'll just go through it quickly. And these are like what we call scatter plots, and it's showing GDP versus happiness. And as you can see, this is what we call a positive relationship, where as GDP increases, happiness increases. It's not 100%, but it's definitely positive. Whereas generosity is a bit negative, but it's not 100% clear what that is. And you can see as you hover, you can see some information comes up about that country. I'll just go through it a little more. and more data, more of that, and some more, and then some other kind of charts. And you can see, you can compare countries. Eva is from Ukraine, and so she little land on Ukraine, so she wanted to compare. Think she made a good point when I was doing this with her. She said that if you look at the least happiest country, they actually, have the biggest kind of like within their score generosity, which is interesting, right? And this is what she came up with as the answer to what makes the world happy. Social support, freedom to make life choices, healthy life expectancy, then GDP, then generosity. So that's kind of like modeling the happiest countries. Cool. What do you think of that? Miguel asked, does something similar exist for Power BI? Not really. I've seen some Power BI. There's like a community. You can share it. However, I believe you can only share it if you have a license and if you're like part of a company. There isn't like just a free version of the software that you can share with the public. So I don't, as far as I know, Power BI doesn't have anything similar. What would be 3 or 4 sources compare this analysis? You mean the data sources, Estelle? I'm not sure I understand the question, if I'm honest. So if you Google World Happiness Report, it'll come up, and actually, yeah, it's on this report. If you open it and just click on that, you'll find the actual data that was used. She used that. She used the world in data, our world in data. Yeah, cool. So that was just a quick detour to show you kind of what you could deliver. I'll paste another one which I think is quite nice, and I'm not going to go through it, but this one is another one that was done by another student, Jonathan, and he did a nice analysis of Barcelona. So have a look and maybe explore Tableau Public to see what you like. There's a lot of good work on there. Any thoughts on that? What do you think? Okay, let me share my screen again. Thanks, Maribeth. I'm just going to share my slides again. Something I want to share. This one. Blue, the Barcelona one, there wasn't a necessarily like he was trying to answer like specific questions. He was mainly trying to sort of do what we call a descriptive analysis. So he was more trying to describe the city based on its data. So what we would call a descriptive analysis is what he did. Daniel, how much time is used? So the course is like the ones that those guys delivered is a 3-month, and probably they spend a full 2 weeks doing that. However, the learning involved to get to that point is 3 months. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So where did we get to? We don't have a lot of time left, so I might just speed up a little bit. So we're at the analyze stage of our workflow. So this is where we work with our data to understand, to answer our questions. So, okay, let's just talk quickly about some statistics, and then we'll do another pivot table, and then we'll see where we get to. So descriptive statistics, I've sort of spoke about it, but what that is a summarized information about a collection of data. So we are talking about things like averages or minimums or maximums. If you've done statistics, standard deviations or median, those kind of statistics are what we call descriptive statistics, because it summarizes a set of data into one number. And then you get something called inferential statistics, which it's like a model that lets you draw conclusions about a population using sample data. So anybody who's taken a statistics course would have most likely used this type of analysis to draw conclusions. But a good example would be, around election time, they do like polling, and they use samples of people to make a prediction or give you an idea of how the election might turn out. So that is what we call inferential statistics. And then lastly, there's something called predictive statistics, which is a model that lets us anticipate how members of a population are likely to behave. So a lot of this is going to be used within a machine learning model to predict an outcome. So, for example, whether it might rain tomorrow. So these are like three different ways of using statistics that we as a data analyst might use. Yeah. So let's do like a quick refresher on mean and median. Mean is what we call the average. So what people who are not statisticians call average. That's what the mean is. And to calculate a mean, you sum up the numbers and you divide by the count of the numbers. So if these are the numbers, we would, to get the average, we would sum up all of them and divide by the number of. So there's 13 and you get 33.8. So that I think everybody understands is an average. The mode is what is the most repeated number in a data set. So in this data set, the number 40 is repeated 4 times. So it is the mode. It is the most common number. It's the most common number which describes the data. Now, you don't use mode very often, but it can become useful. But sometimes you do use median, and median, how you calculate the median is you take the numbers, sort them from low to high, and choose the middle. So there's 13. So we choose the 7th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so you can see 33 is the median. And sometimes use the median because an average can be what's called skewed by big or small numbers. And so sometimes it's much safer to use a median because the median describes the center of the data more accurately. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And then last statistical piece of information is correlation. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about correlation. It gets used in newspapers and all kinds of things. So, but what is it? It is the relationship between two variables described as a number. So it falls between 1 and -1. So 1 being a very positive number, very positive correlation or a strong relationship. So in other words, the values move together, or -1 being very negative, the values move in opposite directions. If we look at this example, we have height and shoe size. Now, we kind of understand that people who are taller most likely have higher shoe size. So we'd expect a positive correlation. And this is the table on the right is plotted in this chart. And as you can see, as the height goes up, the shoe size goes up. So we can say that there is a positive correlation. Right. And these are kind of, if you remember Eva's charts on the scatter plot, we spoke about positive correlation, no correlation, meaning it's but no pattern. That's high, that's perfectly correlated, that's high, that's low, that's no correlation, and this negative, as in if one goes up, the other one goes down. So okay. Hopefully that was like the briefest introduction to statistics, but hopefully it's not too confusing. Let's quickly look at our Netflix challenge again. So let's create another pivot table. I'm gonna share my my spreadsheet again, my Google sheet at least. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, you can see my Google sheet. Okay, so let us use the concept of that we just sort of covered, the descriptive statistics to understand the data better. So what we want to do is we want to create a pivot table, which is going to describe the shows and the average time that people watch shows. So let us do that. So if you remember, you need to select the whole table by using Shift and Control or Command if you're on a Mac. Select the whole table and you say Insert Pivot Table. So we're doing the same thing, but we're doing it on a new sheet. Okay. And this time we are going to put the show in rows. And we are going to, in the value, we can add total minutes watched. But this time we want to change the summarize by to average. So what that is showing me is it's showing the average time watched for each show across all the users. So if you want to make it bigger, you can just do that. So you can see the whole. You just hover and then you just drag with your mouse, and you can see that on average, Squid Game is being watched a lot, 2 hours at a time, which is probably true. It was very addictive in that 2 weeks that it existed. Although I have to remind you, this is not real data. So let's just add a couple of other things to the pivot table so that you can kind of understand that pivot tables can do a lot more. So if you then also go into values and add total minutes watched again, but this time change it to min instead of average, instead of sum, and then do it one more time and actually do max. So what we've done is we've created a summary statistics. We've created so you so you can. I mean, you don't have to drag it because you can see that that's average, that's min, that's max. That's fine. You don't need to see it, right? But you can see that what we've created is the descriptive statistics for each show. We're saying that that's the averages, that's the min time watched, and that's the max time watched. So in other words, it's not real data, but Squid Game is very addictive. And on average, somebody is sitting there for 2 hours at a time, and minimum, somebody sitting there was 78 minutes, although the longest is 150 minutes, so 2.5 hours maybe. Peaky Blinders is also addictive, however, not as strong, and then the others are kind of much less. Make sense? Any interest, Blue? Interesting question. I mean, we do teach a little bit about how to use ChatGPT to leverage your data analysis. It's quite powerful. You can put some data in there and it'll give you some answers. However, with ChatGPT, you always have to be careful. Don't share any personal info or private info from a company because it's publicly, you're sharing it with a public resource. But it does work, and you can use it to help you. I find it very useful to help me sometimes debug code. It makes it quicker to debug Python code or SQL code, for example. So I do recommend ChatGPT as a help. However, be careful when you use it because sometimes it doesn't give you the right answer, and also be careful not to share sensitive information on ChatGPT. Ilias, I wonder, do we still have time or? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay, cool. So we'll just wrap up on the correlation matrix, and then yeah, that'll be that. Okay, cool. So right, so let me show you the correlation matrix. So we spoke about correlation. Brilliant, thanks, Ilias. So, okay, let me just take a step back. So just to reiterate, the words that I used to describe this table about Squid Game being addictive and how you read the numbers, that is part of the analysis. That was me using the descriptive statistics to provide analysis. So let us add a little bit more to the analysis because we are meant to recommend a new show to somebody who kind of watches one show. So if you go to the analysis tab in your Google Sheet, you'll see something that looks like this. And what this is a table which has the shows on the columns as well as the rows. And what this allows us to do is fill in the correlations between that show, Bridgerton and Peaky Blinders and Queen Charlotte. And what we want to do is fill in this table. Now I'm going to show you how to do a couple, and then I'm going to show you the final results because actually we don't have so much time. So let me just do this quickly. So if you're in the table, what we're going to use is a function in Google Sheets. So what you do is you put your cursor in there and you say equal to CORREL. You'll see it comes up. It says it's correlation coefficient. And we want to use that correlation coefficient function to calculate the correlation between Bridgerton and Bridgerton, which is going to be 1 because it's the same. But let's just humor me. What we're going to do is use the first pivot table we created. So the first pivot table you created, what you want to do is you click on that. And I'm just going to show you, and then, sorry, I'll just do it again. I apologize. Equal to Coral, and choose the first pivot table that we created. You want to put your cursor there, Shift, Control down, comma, and then you want to do that again. I know that was fast. Essentially, what that's doing is it's taking those two columns of data and working out the correlation coefficient. Now, what you want to do to fill in this table is you want to fill in the correlation for each of those pairs of data. So it's a lot of work, so we're not going to do it. We'll share the solution with you, but I'm going to show you just how to do two more, and so you know how to do it. So I want to work out the correlation between Bridgerton and Peaky Blinders. So I go to my first pivot table that I created, and I choose Bridgerton. I use Shift Control down, comma, and then I do that again. And what you'll see this time, that is the number that comes out. So what that is saying is that the correlation between people who watch Bridgerton and Peaky Blinders is very close to 0. Let's calculate one more. Let's calculate one more just to show you what the data is going to show you once you fill in the whole table. So I'm putting the cursor in. I'm going to calculate the correlation between Peaky Blinders and Squid Game. That's what I want to do. So I do the same. I go to that table. I choose Peaky Blinders, comma. I scroll up. I choose Squid Game. Aha. That is saying that there is a very strong relationship between people who watch Squid Game and Peaky Blinders. Okay, so let us. So what I would then challenge you to do is actually fill this in based on what I just showed you, and then what you really want to end up with is something that looks like this. So let's have a quick look at that. It's saying, so what we can see is that's got high positive correlation. Wednesday and The Good Place have high positive correlation. This is positive correlation, Bridgerton and Queen Charlotte. And then everything else is sort of not very strong. There's some negative, but not very strong. Sure, Frank, let me show you again. Let me go there. My move, I like that. So I'm doing Queen Charlotte and Bridgerton. So you say equal to Coral, open bracket, right? Go to that. So I'm looking for, so I go to the top. Queen Charlotte. I select Command, Shift, Control, or Command. Then you put comma. Then you scroll to the top, and I'm doing Bridgerton. So I just put my cursor in the Bridgerton, and then I do the same. Shift Control down. And then you press Enter. Okay, hopefully that worked for you. So this is what you end up with. And one is the highest correlation. One is perfect correlation. So 0.95 is very high. It's very, very high. 0.9 is also very high. 0.57 is strong, but it's not like very, very strong. And why I was saying these negative ones are not like -1. It's not -1, it's quite low. So these are like low negative correlations, but they are negative. As in, what that means is people who tend to watch The Good Place are not that interested in the Squid Game. Somebody can confirm. Okay, so I'm going to show you one more. Oh, so you can see I have colored this in, and I'm going to suggest you look up something called conditional formatting, which allows you to color in data based on the numbers, because we don't have time. I just want to show you one more thing, and then we can wrap up. So what I want to show you is, so we spoke about the last, so what we've done is we've created our analysis, and I've said in words my interpretation of the data. And obviously, we'd need to write that down, but I've said it in words. So if I wanted to communicate those, I want to create a chart. So I'm going to show you how to create a chart, one chart, and then we'll wrap up from there. So how we're going to do that is we're going to create a what's called a scatter plot. So if we go to the original pivot table we created, and I want to see that correlation in sort of visual form, right? So I know that there's a strong positive correlation between Squid Game and Piggy Blinders, but I want to see that in a visual form. So how do you do that? You say, so I'm on this sheet, you say insert chart. Oh, does it automatically, which is annoying. So what you want to do then is, so it does it automatically, and it's automatically created a histogram, which is not that helpful. So what you can then do is just change that to a scatter, right? So I went to the drop down, I changed it to a scatter. I want to now I need to select the data. Okay, that's not a good way of doing it. I apologize. I'm going to do it again. So what we want to do is do the select like I taught you using Command and Shift, and do the same. So now hold down Control, put your cursor there, hold down Shift, and oh, that didn't work. I apologize. Okay. Let me try again. I apologize for this. So I'm going to select the whole column, and I'm going to hold down Control and select the whole column like that. Right? So I've selected the whole column. I'll show you again. I put my cursor on the C, hold down Control or Command, and use my mouse to click that. So I've selected both columns. I use Control C, which is copy. I want to add a new sheet. So I've clicked this plus. I want to paste. So I've got that there, right? And then I want to now insert chart. And I want to make that a scatter. Now, we know that is 0.95, so that's why it looks pretty much like a straight line. I'm happy to show you again, although hopefully that made sense. Cool. Okay. I just wanted the validation. Thank you. Okay, so let me just go back to my slides. So that's where we've ended up. Look, visualization is a big part of data analysis. So this is showing a visualization of the USA and showing the effect of climate change in the future. So, and I shared you a couple of charts from my students, which hopefully shows you how powerful visualization can be and how, how impactful. Okay, so that was a whirlwind. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Congratulations.
All right, amazing, amazing. Thank you, Shaheed. By the way, how is my audio? Is it better?
It's okay. It's slightly better than earlier, I would say. Not 100%.
Let me do something. What about now? Is it better?
That's better.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining.